Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Divergent's 2020 Technology Wrap-Up. As we get started and get settled, feel free to take the opportunity to order your lunch through Grubhub. You should have received a welcome email this afternoon, and if you do not see that in your Grubhub line of credit or have not received an email, please feel free to reach out to megan.aylesworth@divergent.com, and she'll be happy to help get that applied to your account. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. My name is Emily Carlson, and I'm the Vice President of Technology for Divergent. I'm really excited to have a whole group of panelists here with me as we discuss 2020 in retrospect and just provide kind of an overall wrap up and also where we see 2021 heading towards from a technology perspective. I would like to introduce first our guests from Microsoft, Jamie and Joshua, and I would ask, would you guys mind doing just a quick introduction? Maybe start with Jamie?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jamie Foxx. I'm an account technology strategist with Microsoft. 2007. My role is basically to look after a large healthcare customer and ensure our technical alignment with them. In addition to that, I also do a lot of extra activities, including I'm on the board of directors of HIMSS in New Jersey. I'm on the advisory board for Divergent, and I also run the SQL Server user group for Central New Jersey.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Jamie. Josh?
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Josh Thompson. I am what's called a customer success manager in healthcare at Microsoft. So I work with many large healthcare organizations to help them get as much value out of their investment in Microsoft as possible and to innovate with Teams as a platform for work. So great to be here.
Great. Thanks, you guys, and thank you for joining us today. From my team here at Divergent, and if Jose, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slides by a couple just for the intro, I'd like to ask both Jose Maldonado and Mike Bright to do a quick hello and introduction.
Hey, my name is Mike Bright. I've been with Divergent for almost 2 years now, with about 15 years of healthcare IT experience.
My name is Jose Maldonado, Senior Manager with Divergent. Been on with them happily for almost 3 years, specializing in SCCM, Office 365, and some Azure components.
Great, thanks, and thanks you guys for helping me to have this discussion today. Jose, would you mind advancing to the next slide? Great, thanks. So what I'd like to do as part of this conversation is start with what we've seen in 2020. You know, if I think back to, really January where we started, fast forward to March, and now here we are in December. There's been a lot of, I think, uniqueness that this year has brought, both from the technology piece, but also from a social perspective, and kind of what we've seen and what we've felt in 2020, both from just daily work, supply chain, and just really have a conversation, kind of some of our perspective, and then as we wrap up, talk about what we think 2021 may hold, again, both from that tech and social perspective. So guys, I mean, 2020, I'm not sure how much more we can really say to that, but what's everybody seen? I look at that quick shift, and thinking about it very quickly, going back to March of me personally walking around New York City on March 12th and then March 13th landing here at home and staying here at home, which is uniquely different than 2019, where we spent about 220 days on the road. So from that shift and that remote perspective, what have you guys seen and felt?
Jamie, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. So obviously a lot of people have been working remotely, right? as you said, Emily, in the middle of March, basically the entire world was, changed in a big way that we had to all work from home. Some of us have worked from home for some time. Some of my customers have already set up some work at home environments, but I did have a few customers that weren't, let's say, prepared for this or weren't ready for this. So obviously a lot of things had to be done in a short order for these customers or these companies to accommodate a work from home for 100% of their employees. So some of the things I saw or some of the challenges they had were, do we have the capacity to bring all of our employees remote? Not every customer is in the cloud, or not every customer is very cloud friendly. So I had one company that had a VPN, but their VPN capacity was only for half their employees. They had to rapidly expand their VPN capacity, right? And then within a few weeks, I was asking them, so are you guys now interested in some cloud services? Because obviously that would make your transition to virtual and remote work very easy, and it's scalable. Not only is it scalable, but you don't have to do anything to scale, right? That's where the Microsoft or any other cloud service just scales automatically for you. So those were the kinds of the things we saw. The other thing, from a more social aspect, I think people were working differently at home, right? They had to worry about family. They had other priorities throughout their day. So I think we have some interesting thoughts on that, right? Right, group?
Yeah. And I think just to kind of build off of that, and you summarized it well, but breaking it down into kind of two buckets, you've got a technology bucket and you've got kind of the people and the social bucket. And on the technology side, it was very much a fire drill back in March and April. I mean, working in the healthcare space, like, what do you do when nurses and doctors can't go onto units because they're COVID units, right? Or how do you move thousands of people to work from home over the course of a weekend? And so lots of different technologies that were deployed, that were purchased, and that people were trying to figure out how to use. And so that created some kind of pros and cons, as we talk about what things are going to look like move forward. That'll probably build off of that a little bit. But then, yeah, on the people side, I would say, me personally, I feel like, and Microsoft more broadly has found, in just looking at our data, that the work week has extended, or the workday has extended, right? 7 out of 10 people are working at least 3 hours longer than they were pre-COVID. And they're also collaborating 30% more after hours, because they are, just like you said, Jamie, they're not only employees, but they're also like teachers, for their kids at home. They are technologists as they're trying to help their kids get set up with, virtual school. And they're constantly bouncing back and forth between what were historically separate and distinct worlds. And so it's just knocked all the walls down and blended it all together, which has been really cool, because now, if you're working from home, you can transition from one world to the other world very, very fast. But it also presents a lot of challenges when it comes to things like employee engagement and burnout and that social dynamic that I think we all crave.
Yeah.
So I know that they were pushing, I think, was it Inspire or Ignite? Headspace. Microsoft was introducing Headspace. I'm not sure if it was a Teams integration, but it was something where, now, one's well-being, right, state of mind, stress levels, and things of that nature are coming into play because of all the factors you just mentioned.
Yeah. So no, that's a great point, Jose. So at I think it was Ignite, we talked about this Headspace partnership, but even more broadly, Microsoft has solutions like My Analytics and Workplace Analytics that are used and have been used for years for people to have data points around, hey, how big is my network at work? And the people that I'm collaborating with, how many meetings am I also sending emails in, that I'm attending, or how much am I working after hours? And taking those types of insights and then adding in other things like Headspace to help with just meditation exercises, this capability that we'll be releasing, I believe, early next year around a virtual commute, just to help people wind down from the day, so that when they walk back into their personal life with their family and they sit down at dinner, they're not still trying to go at 100 miles an hour, from coming directly from work. So lots of features, for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you think about the uniqueness is that our lives now entail, there's no true separation. There was a lot of folks who their commute was their downtime. That was the delineation of, I get to stop work now. I think, Jamie, you mentioned it in a conversation we've had previously where, there's something to clocking out at 5:01 and getting in your car and driving home. And now, we do not have that segregation a lot of times, because we're still, not only are we at the end of the day still really truly engaged because we work where we live, but during the course of the day, we're always having to then, go check in on the kids. And I think we were joking around earlier about making sure that, that making meals during conference calls is now something that's, just standard as part of our day. It's funny. And when the kids went back to school, we joked internally here at Divurgent that I should set up like a call queue for, tech support for our kids, and we could share, our technology struggles that our kids were having as they were getting re-engaged with remote learning. So it's so interesting to see how everything's just become blended, and what that means from an impact both at the tech side, but also our day-to-day, socialization and, being able to segregate work and home.
No, I agree. I think my biggest challenge personally is, like you said, the context switching. There's times where every 5 minutes I'm doing an email, then I have to go help my kids, then I have to do an email, then a guy's coming at my door, and I'm personally struggling with just staying focused sometimes over the course of even a short hour, or my kids are asking me to run to Wendy's or something like that. So it is a very interesting way of you blending your personal life with your work life. And, one of the things I spoke about, with the team here before we came on was, it's never really been about work-life balance. It's really about work-life integration. I think I'm experiencing, like many others, like say at 2:30 on a Tuesday, you have to take care of something, whether it's your children, another family member, or something else in your personal life. I think the new normal, and I think this is going to last beyond the pandemic, is 2:30 on Tuesday. If you have something to do that's important to you, no matter what, just go ahead and do it. But then I find myself, and I think a lot of other people, 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, then catching up on emails or doing something else with their time with work, right? So I think this whole shift in the way we work, which was started because of the pandemic, not only is going to stay beyond the pandemic, but I think it really helps build a more flexible work style. And like Josh said, we're actually very easily measuring that 3 more hours of productivity are coming out of employees on the average, right? And the other thing I think, at least for me, I don't know how everyone else feels, I'm more engaged because of my job, since I'm working from home, right? I don't have that kind of hard stop at work where I change my hat, I change my mode to another person almost at the end of the workday. I'm always doing both at the same time, juggling things in my mind. So I think I'm a more engaged employee. And I'd love to see some data over the long term of that's really been helping employers and productivity, just overall engagement, just because it's a lot easier for me to be engaged, right? I don't have to go in a car. I don't have to change so much. I just, more times than not, just go to another room in my house.
I think there's a lot to be said for that flexibility. You know, when you read a lot of headlines, a lot of it focuses on kind of the negative, And 2020 is a year where it's really easy to focus on kind of the negative side, but some of that flexibility can be a huge benefit. You know, we were on, you know, before the Thanksgiving holiday, I went from Dallas to Utah with my family to just stay with my in-laws for 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. And then, you know, nothing changed with how I worked except for the time zone. It was the exact same. And then Emily, you and Jamie and Jose were all kind of the victims of this, right? But then we drove back, and then even on the drive back, I had several meetings and phone calls that I was taking from hotel rooms and on the road in Arizona and New Mexico. And and I think that was a really cool experience to go through, and it wouldn't have been possible, you know, 8 to 10 months ago. So really just kind of interesting. There are definitely a lot of negatives, you know, that have come from this, and challenges, I would say, around things like employee engagement and risks around burnout. But I think it's also opened the door for greater flexibility and kind of experimentation on the part of individuals and companies and how work is done. And that can be very positive.
And you had a lot of companies that were now clamoring for the same things they were trying to avoid in the past, right? So, you know, being equipped to work remote, right? That was a new, that not that it was new, but it's almost like there was a trust factor there between the organization and its employees, and the mindset of, hey, well, if they're home, then they're not working, right? So there had to be a shift there, and the shift came rather quickly, and it's now they're, instead of you trying to sell them on something, now all of a sudden they are knocking down your door saying, hey, listen, we need this real quick, what do you have, right? So that maturity level just shot up, you know, tenfold overnight.
Yeah, we definitely saw, you know, years of digital transformation in the course of, you know, 6 months for sure. But I would also say that part of the reason too is because organizations recognize that they need to retain talent. You know, I was talking with an HR department just a couple weeks ago, and they were telling me how they recruit a lot from consulting organizations for certain roles, and they need to be able to tell a compelling story around, you know, why you should move from a consulting, you know, world or technology role into a healthcare role. And if you're asking them to do that, and then to commute for an hour each way, and, you know, be in the office by 9 and leave by 5, like, that's a lot less compelling than, you know, the organizations that provide the flexibility that we've talked about. And so there's a lot of kind of macro forces when it comes to, you know, talent and retaining and recruiting talent that I think are also at play here.
Yeah, and I think with that too, it's enabling the new technologies on a continual basis that make those now standard work at home scenarios, and, you know, driving the best talent to be onboarded for organizations, that's going to become just increasingly more important, you know, as work at home, and as again recruiting into those more standard roles, and, you know, seeing this expansion of Jose, to your point, of trust to, you know, from employer to employee. I think that the tech piece of that just plays a very important role, you know, to keep people feeling like they're empowered to continue to deliver and drive to their best.
I can see that question in bold-faced letters now. How do you perform unsupervised?
Yeah.
So how does that change everything? So if remote work for some reason becomes the norm, right? So then how does that change? Because again, it's not a matter of what's the future of remote work, what's the future of work at this point, right? What does it look like for us now that hopefully we're close to becoming post-COVID, right? Organizations, what's the impact of all of this and them having to literally mature overnight. And when I say mature overnight, I'm thinking of, let's say a teenager that has to, for some reason, gain all this responsibility overnight. But that's almost the equivalent of what happened with organizations whose mindset was a little different than it is today. And it was more than just a rude awakening. It was like a, almost hitting them like a brick wall.
Yep.
Well, I think it's also a matter of adaptability, right? And there are certain industries out there that have to be a little bit more or a lot more agile to adapt. And I think this is not just an industry specific shift. This is a societal shift that's happened very, very, very quickly. I saw a meme a few weeks ago where one of these cartoons on Facebook where it had a person asking a CIO, so what's your strategy for digital transformation, or what's making you digitally transform? And the CIO goes, COVID, right? So it's not even like it's a planned thing. It's not even being strategic. It's almost by force and out of reaction, right? So I think the other thing is that, especially with as we go within younger generations, they're so used to this, and they're going to expect these things from employers, right? People are going to choose where they work based on the flexibility arrangements or where they can work, or it's going to be table stakes to offer things like you said, Jose, work from home and stuff of that nature. I think also it expands the talent pool, because traditionally you'd always have a talent pool that's local to where your office is, right? Now, if you can work remote, like Josh was saying before, you could be anywhere in the world or anywhere in the country and say, okay, I have this special skill. I know I can work at your company, I can contribute, and you don't have to live within a 30-mile radius of the building that's hiring, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of changes with that, and people are going to expect it. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few years after the pandemic. And I think certain companies are going to have the companies that adapt faster, as usual, are going to have a competitive advantage, especially for talent.
Yeah, just one more thing to add on to that. I think one of the things that I've noticed, or at least an idea I've had out of this, is emphasis on education and professional development. So, I mean, how many IT teams are used to supporting on-prem technology and now all of a sudden are thrust into this cloud world, and they just don't have the skill set? So I think an emphasis on education and staying current on emerging technologies is going to be very important going forward.
Yeah, actually, in addition to that, in a more technical sense, right? So people aren't allowed to go to the office, and this really did happen to me a few weeks ago. My laptop broke. What do I do, right? I had to go back and forth with FedExes and shipping, laptops, and I got a temporary machine, and it was a mini nightmare, right? Because we're so used to just going to an IT desk and say, hey, can you just give me a temporary machine while you fix my current machine? And so I had to get a temporary machine shipped to my house. A week later, I got my permanent machine back. So I think there still needs to be a little bit of room for improvement on just how to do some basic IT support on how to work from home. And it's almost to your point, Michael, that, an education, not just from supporting the systems. I felt in this day and age, I felt so helpless not having a machine I can use to do my job, and knowing that there was nowhere for me to go, right? I was at the mercy of my shipment. And actually, I was using my iPhone to do all my work. I have a funny story. I have a wireless keyboard that I Bluetooth to my iPhone, and my iPhone was my primary work machine for 3 days.
Well, let's not forget that iPad has. Let's not forget that iPad OS now has mouse support, so it makes it very interesting.
Agreed, but it was my phone, not even the iPad. I just needed something, to be able to my work on. So very interesting.
So that segues into our next slide, right? So bringing your own device, or BYOD. Again, so we have companies now coming to us about technologies they didn't even want to consider, a year ago or more, right? So we talk about, I remember 2019, certain organizations where I've consulted, and I said, hey, if you leverage the cloud for this, if you leverage the cloud for that, and Azure technologies and so on and so forth, and they were like, we're just iffy on the security of it. We're now this year in the middle of the pandemic, and we use COVID and pandemic, and I know that it seems as if we're wearing that term out, but it's just a reality of things, right? And they're asking, okay, so if we do leverage the cloud, if we leverage OneDrive, if we leverage Exchange Online and things of that nature, what are the security pieces to it? And now we have to have a meeting with security SMEs on the line, going into granular, painstaking detail, right? And I love those security calls, right? We all do.
Yeah.
No, but so how do we keep the data secure, right? Especially in these organizations where the data is ultra sensitive, right? Financial institutions and healthcare organizations. So how do we keep the data secure? How do we keep the data from leaving the organizations and things of that nature? They're actually having and calling for the conversations that they could have been, or probably maybe even should have been, prior to COVID, let's say back in 2019, 2018, where they just wouldn't have it, right? But it's that maturity and awareness just kind of shot up, and now they want to get fully educated on what these pieces are and what components go along with them, and how can you put a plan or solution together for us to move forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, Jose. I've had several organizations that I support where, just over a weekend, they moved 10,000 people, 6,000 people, in some cases more, to work from home. And it's not like all those people could take their work computers, put them in their car and drive them home, right? And so really, really quickly needed to figure out, hey, how can they access the work files, the work conversations, the emails, everything else on their personal computers or on their smartphones. And so there was a security component too, but then, it's really interesting how, networking and infrastructure teams go from managing corporate networks to now all of a sudden, how do you manage everybody's individual internet service that they have, in their house, and how does that affect your work? And so lots of just big challenges around the security side, as well as I think the networking side and infrastructure side. But lots of, again, opportunity for people to start begin to understand things like split tunneling their VPN, or expanding just the pipe on their VPN to support a greater number of employees, or how do you have mobile device or mobile application management and enable that for, a large workforce.
So it becomes, I can see IT departments and technology departments having to develop newer policies, right? And then say, hey, so we can support you from the computer to the router, from the router to the modem and out to the WAN. You're going to have to, contact your local ISP, right? And because if not, you'll be troubleshooting or it's never ending troubleshooting, right? So what truly can eliminate that is what I've seen at this point is, having some sort of BYOD where they can remote into a virtual Windows environment, right, like WVD. And now there's not so much to support on their side, because technically that's almost right, device agnostic. They can remote in, and now you're working on a desktop that is virtual.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the virtualized desktop is kind of the answer to this, right? So with that, you can control a lot more. You can control the security. You can control, data security, identity security. So, I've seen some customers, in the last few months definitely look in and start implementing Windows Virtual Desktop. Also, to your point, Jose, is that it does definitely abstract and decouple from the machine itself, which is really neat, because then you could have a variety of machines and you can do bring your own device in a lot safer mode, and it allows employees, once again, to have a level of flexibility to have the device they want, the form factors they want. Obviously, there's a lot new form factors every day, from including the Surface Duo, which is a new thing that Microsoft's coming out with. Check it out. So there's a lot of interesting things that you can do now when you bring that virtualized desktop onto I hate to use the term dumb terminal because it's so legacy, but you kind of are turning your computers and your devices almost into a dumb terminal at that point. The other thing that I'm noticing is that some of the situation we're in is sparking a lot of innovation. There's a lot more startups I'm talking to and hearing from that are doing really interesting things around identity security and data security, doing things blending artificial intelligence, trying to outguess where the next breach will be or the next attack will be. So I think to some degree with what you guys were saying is that, there's a lot of engineering that each company is trying to do to figure out how to make themselves more secure. I think this is another catalyst to make data security and identity security move much, much faster. And it's opening up a lot of innovation in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and I think, and taking all of that, what this does is sets us up for future scalability. So, very quickly in March, we weren't necessarily thinking about the security components that come with implementing WVD or any type of, virtualized environment. What we knew is we had a problem, and the solution to our problem was establishing virtual desktops and infrastructure. And now that we've got maybe a little bit of a breather, we can go back, revisit the security that was applied within that virtual environment, but then say, I can scale this. If I look at our organization, sometimes we have to very quickly scale up and get 185, virtual desktops created. That's far easier from a production support perspective than sending out and procuring 185 devices. So we've left it for ourselves for expandability and scalability, and to be able to respond versus react to some of these ongoing challenges that we continue to face through the pandemic. And Mike, I don't know. Oh, okay.
No, I want to say that I agree with you, because I think that overall there's less of a challenge dealing with a virtual environment than there is, and again, I know that it can get funky sometimes, right? But then dealing with hardware, having to spin up 500 virtual machines, or having to order and procure, then image and stage, 500 laptops. It's a different, there's one requires much more effort than the other, and along, all the other things that come along with it.
Yeah, and can we? Also, it's an opportunity to standardize the environment. So I look at, for us, it's, and for a lot of our clients, it's Windows 10, as the standard, but then we have that subset of application packages that we know we want to, to provide to our team members. So we can have that standard image, which includes standard applications, and we have an environment that's far easier to maintain than me having, 85 different laptops out there, and for, our clients to have to try to support the 85 different versions. It also helps to keep some of that shadow IT outside of there. We're a Microsoft shop. I want to make sure that we're using Teams as our collaboration platform, keeping the shadow, other audio type of components being, applied into the environment. It's far less from an ongoing support perspective. It allows that standardization. And, now I think if we're looking future state, we're going to have to go back and revisit, what we quickly implemented, and, make sure that the standards are documented, that everything is documented from this environment. But hey, what a cool benefit. Now we've just got this virtual environment that we can maintain, and, the standards are here for our organizations, and, we're really able to keep controls more in that environment than we were with having just standard devices.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, what's interesting to me is that none of this is really new, right?
Right.
Yeah. People were reluctant to do this for one reason or another. But again, the catalyst was, we all got hit over the head pretty hard in March that you have to do this, right? There's no option. It's a big societal shift that happened so quickly. But the whole notion of virtualized desktops has been around for 20 years, right? And different companies do it different ways and all that. So to your point, Emily, to have a more standard approach, it's going to work. The other thing I find interesting is this goes hand in hand with security, as you said, when you have a lot of variety in your environment, especially when you're talking about different kinds of collaboration tools and file shares, not all of them have the same levels of security. And if you're an IT shop, you're not trying to secure all of them, right? If you have OneDrive, Box, Dropbox, that's a bit of a nightmare for you as an IT administrator to make sure that you are securing and being compliant with that. So by having that, that flexible, I'm not going to call it flexible, but that easy flexible deployment of Windows desktop or virtual desktop, you kind of take that headache away from you also.
Yeah, and you had organizations out there that literally, because of the shortage in the supply chain, they had to run out, and now they can't get their computers from their vendors, so they're literally going out to your Best Buys, to your Fry's, to Micro Center to pick up laptops, and then you can't just have everyone come into the office to pick up this equipment, so they're shipping this stuff out. They're not. In some cases, not even joining the machines to the domain. They're going out with local accounts, right? And hoping that, leveraging VPN, right? But how secure is it where, you're using a local account? Now you have, let's say, another 70 models of laptops in your environment. So, driver management is a thing you don't know because these are consumer grade. So what about the proper TPM if they even have or equipped with TPM? So what happens there is now you're telling me that now we can't encrypt them the way they need to be. It becomes, or has become, a nightmare. And so the issue is, okay, so we got everyone remote, right? So that's one thing. But two, now they're not secure, right? And then three, manageability. How do we manage this moving forward? How do we get driver management under control? What do we do with these consumer grade equipment that we just bought, right? So there's a lot that kind of goes into it, where I think that having built images for corporations, organizations, hundreds, maybe even going into the thousands, it was about standardizing, right? If we can build an image for an organization, the goal is to have the computer and the software behave as intended, right? So that way it makes support a lot easier. So I think that when you go virtual, let's say something like using or leveraging Windows Virtual Desktop, it's like the ultimate level of standardization with all of the controls. And then, I'm not a security guy, so I'm not big on locking everything down. But I always say my rule of thumb is to have it secure enough where it keeps the bad people out, and it also gives usability to the employees so they can perform their daily duties, and everybody goes home happy.
I think the other element of this is preparedness, right? And again, it's not that any of this stuff cannot be done, and maybe there's some room for growth for better security, especially from remote. And I know a lot of companies in the last 9 months are making a lot more investments to come up with new ideas, and like I said, there's a catalyst for innovation. But I think one thing that we kind of learned even from the 9/11 days, which I guess I'm dating myself now when I use that as a reference, is no one was ready for it, right? It's not a matter of what we can or can't do sometimes. It's a matter of, are we prepared to do it? And I think one thing that the world is learning through the pandemic is another vector of preparedness we need, right? What happens if the global supply chain shuts down? Or what happens if all of a sudden everyone needs to, be in a flexible working environment, right? As you said, Jose, not every organization was set up to secure that, right? So I think one thing I hope that the world learned from this event is be more prepared for things like that, right? There's no reason why you could argue that there was no reason why you shouldn't be secure enough to work from home before the pandemic, right? Yes, we know companies have politics, there's reasons, there's budget and all these other things, but that all became irrelevant on the middle of March. They had to, right? So they weren't prepared, but yet the companies that were better prepared for this probably had a much easier time doing this. And as I said, there are companies out there that were already working from home or working on a work at home strategy prior to the pandemic.
Yep.
Yeah. No. So we were told, Jamie, by certain clients, no, we don't want to discuss Teams, right? When we're doing a presentation, and they were adamant about that, I think that, and I see Emily on camera here smiling and smirking. But yeah, so I remember the Pentium 4 hyper-threading processor. And I remember that when it was released, it was the software, right? I think it was Windows XP at the time. It didn't quite support it, or it was a little bit more advanced, right, than the software itself. So I do think that here comes the pandemic, here comes COVID-19, and it strikes us overnight, and things get progressively bad quickly. And all the pieces and components that we need to be able to develop these solutions for any organization, it already exists, right? But it's almost like you said before the call, Jamie, that Microsoft has been doing some of this stuff for a long time. And I'm not saying that Microsoft is the only one, but we know that Microsoft is one of the leaders of such technology. And the solutions are there. The clients probably hesitated, and it was either lack of knowledge of the technology. There was some timidness, or even just afraid of going. What do you mean our data is going to be on the cloud, right? How are you going to secure it? The cloud. I remember there was some movie where they were saying, "Where's the cloud?" Oh, the cloud's just somewhere. Where is it? It's the cloud. What causes these things to happen? Good things to happen? The cloud. What causes bad things to happen? The cloud. Right. But in all seriousness, it was I think there was a knowledge gap there, that now they really wanted to listen. They were focused. They were hyper focused, right, on the edge of their seats on what we had to say, and doing security audits and saying, hey, so let's do a pilot, let's do a proof of concept, let's move some blank data over and create some users, and this is what it would look like. Let's access the data, right? What are some of the controls? And now we have them navigating through the different admin centers on the cloud, whereas before they just wouldn't touch it.
And I think Josh and Jamie, I think that that's particularly true, that hesitation from healthcare perspective, right? So I think we're definitely in that unique space where our clients are really want to be protective for good reason, so there is that hesitation, and this may have just catapulted us to the other side of that hesitation due to what we've seen the past year.
Well, what I find pretty interesting, though, is, and I've told customers this over the last few years about their hesitation for cloud, is that, I read in the newspaper every day, again, dating myself, I read the newspaper, or I read online every day, how many different organizations get hacked, ransomware, whatever the kind of threat it is, across all industries. And I keep telling my customers, oh, you guys are better at this than we are at this point, right? And I don't mean that in a conceited standpoint, but I think if you really want the best security out there, you go to a cloud provider. And I'll even say, even our competitors, we're betting our business on the cloud. So we're going to have the absolute best security that you could imagine. I can't imagine that every last customer has data centers with biometric security to have people enter their building, right? We do, right? We are completely transparent at Microsoft, and I'm sure our competitors are as well. Come visit our data center. We will show you exactly how we secure your data and everything. I don't think most companies out there have even close to the level of security we have. And what I'm starting to see with some smarter or some advanced companies, they're coming to the cloud for the security, right? They're not afraid of the security in the cloud. They're actually embracing it because they know that we have the resources as a mega cloud provider to provide security that they can't afford or implement. So I'd like to see that happen faster in the industry, but I've always said, I'm like, what makes you think that you're more secure than I am, especially when you're a 5,000, 10,000 person company that doesn't do technology as your core competency?
And I think in addition to security, I know we've talked a lot about the security in the supply chain, but another huge reason why I think, as you mentioned, Emily, that companies are getting catapulted into this pro cloud world is also the pace of innovation.
Yeah.
Because historically, maybe it was annual or every 6 months or something. Hey, let's update this, let's do that. But now it is a constant, when the features that are being released into like Microsoft Teams as an example, new features in almost every week. And each one of those features is targeted and thought out to drive increased, efficiency and capability on the part of organizations and employees. And so that's something else that I think, because organizations had to rapidly adapt so much, as we look forward, that more and more will embrace the cloud for the security capabilities as well as those innovation capabilities. And the way, in addition to innovation, kind of complementary to it, the way that those rapidly innovative and growing capabilities can start to replace lots of individual kind of pointed applications. Something that I've seen a lot in my role is how there was a big fire drill for people to go out and start buying technology to solve problems back in March and April and even today. But now organizations are spending a lot of money on technology, and a lot of that technology does like one or two things. And it kind of exacerbates this employee experience problem that they are dealing with. And so that's a big thing that I see and I talk to a lot of people about is, look, you've got this secure platform that is growing and evolving very, very quickly. How can you, reduce your overall IT spend to prevent, employees from having to be furloughed, right? How can you reduce the number of organizations that you need to get support from, when something goes wrong? And how can you create a much more cohesive work environment so they don't need to go to 10 or 20 applications all throughout their day in order to just get their job done?
Yeah, I agree with that completely, Josh. And I think that, looking at 21, there's opportunity to perform more of that application rationalization type of program to take, again, either applications that we purchased very rapidly to solve an immediate problem, or maybe there's even a legacy app that we've forgotten about, and it's truly there's a drain on the budget because it's sitting out there. But when we look at the evolvement of, the Teams platform is one, there's ways to use AI and use, the Power Platform and use ways to integrate into just a singular workspace that you go to on a day-to-day basis and bring what those other applications we're doing into Teams. With the licensing structure, you're paying for it anyways, right? So the best way to optimize that, and you can't optimize in your environment until you know what you have. So I think now is a great time to look at all of the different applications, look at the spend associated with each one of those apps and see where you can retire some of those and bring it into one platform. It's a single point of entry for your team members on a daily basis. And there's high revenue impacts to that. I look at just the support piece. Mike, you can probably speak to this better than, I can, but, even just, smaller organizations to have, 3 different collaboration or file share locations, that's 3 different applications that I have to support versus bringing it all under one umbrella and one infrastructure makes for a far more efficient approach to technology. And Mike, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, well, and securing them as well. So, you have to know what's out there, what kind of data is being moved back and forth and who has access to it. So that's another challenge as well. I mean, especially if you don't know it exists. So, leveraging the tools that you have and understanding what's in your environment is huge.
Yeah, it's interesting. Go on.
Oh, no, go ahead, Jamie.
I was just going to say that, again, another thing that was catalyzed through this is governance, right? Was, hey, now what do we have and what is shadow IT running and what are we running, and right? Because I would assume, I don't know this for certain, that this really shined a strong light on shadow IT having to move everything remote, right? So if we follow the course of our discussion here today, that everyone has to be remote, this catalyzed people being remote, Windows Virtual Desktop, and to your point earlier, Emily, of really exposing shadow IT. Think about what that means from an overall governance standpoint, right? And then the next part of that, to your point, Emily, is can we rationalize spend?
Yeah.
But I know, Josh, you were about to say something.
I was going to talk about, you mentioned kind of file storage, and I think that's a big one. Lots of those Alphabet drives and shared drives. How do you move those into the cloud, and how do you I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but also in the meeting space. I think so many organizations now have 2 or 3 plus meeting solutions, and people are on meetings more than ever before. But it's incredibly challenging to constantly bounce back between different solutions with different feature sets, as well as another example of this idea of a platform versus a point solution, right? If you're having your conversations and you're creating your files and your agendas and you're doing everything before the meeting and after the meeting, assigning the tasks and the action items, collecting feedback, you're doing that in one place, but then the meeting is in another place. It prevents I think a lot of efficiencies from an operational standpoint, and employee experience standpoint, while also simultaneously driving up costs.
Yeah, I think that that is that's the thing. So I've never seen so many different collaboration tools and meeting tools. Some that I just never heard of. Right, I'm not going to mention any names here, but I mean literally, like if I go through my phone, there's probably 7 of them, right? Because having to connect with different prospective clients and clients, they may be using a different technology or software to accomplish that. So my thoughts is, hey, so how can I accomplish what I need to accomplish, right? So I prioritize things, right? So for me, it's office integration, which obviously Teams does very well, and then the meeting capabilities and the live events and so on and so forth, right? But without that office integration, to me it would make my life harder, which I'm pretty sure that a lot of organizations pre-COVID didn't account so much for user experience. Some did, some didn't, right? I experienced both, but now it's like if I had to switch to a non-Teams virtual meeting platform and then go to Teams for messaging and collaboration and the office integration piece, that would be a bit much for me. The fact that I have it all sewn together. And so does any one of them do everything well? Well, obviously not, right? But again, I look at priority, and that would be not just the messaging, the meetings, but also that office integration. So for me, it would be Teams, right? But for other companies, it could be whatever it is, or they'll say, hey, this is not as important to us. So
well, one thing that's for certain is that collaboration is really hot right now. And just myself, I had 10 to 12 calls yesterday. I was keeping a tally of how many different platforms I was using. Obviously, I work at Microsoft, so our default platform is Teams. I worked on 2 other, I won't tell you which ones. I had calls on 2 other platforms, one of which I had multiple calls on yesterday. So yeah, there is certainly a annoyance of switching from one platform to the other. But one thing, and I think this is a little bit more even that Divurgent could help with out there, is I'm noticing a lot of other software vendors, ISVs, such as the EHRs, they're trying to get collaboration into their software. And we just saw last week, I think it was Salesforce purchased Slack. I think a lot of the applications out there where people spend most of their days, whether it's an EHR in the for the healthcare community, whether it's Salesforce for those people who are in that kind of line of work, They don't want to context switch into another application or multiple applications just to ask a quick question. So I'm seeing a lot of integration of persistent chat. My one customer is actually at one point was thinking maybe we should build our own. And now I think a lot of those kinds of EHR-ish, and I know Divurgent does a lot of work with EHRs, is can we integrate these collaboration tools into EHRs where most clinicians spend most of their days. So I think you're going to start seeing even more of that, and that's already starting to happen, is certain applications where people spend a lot of their time during the day are going to look to either somehow integrate, build their own, or something like that of that nature to use collaboration. Because, I mean, let's face it, collaboration is all about asking someone for a question, asking for help, talking to someone, and everyone in all their jobs need to do that at one point. And I think the people who are building applications for that don't want people to be outside of their application, right? Salesforce doesn't want people to then jump to Teams and then jump back to Salesforce, or any of the EHR vendors likewise.
And yeah, I think Epic also has some sort of messaging platform.
Yes.
Now. Yep. So I'm sorry, Josh, you can go. Just want to let everyone know we're down to 4 minutes here.
Yeah, 100%. No, and I think just as I look to wrap up, I think a lot of it is going to come down looking forward to evolution and thinking from, hey, I've got these 5, problems, I need 5 solutions, to now, hey, what kind of a platform can help me to solve, however many problems that I have. That historically people tend, even in personal life, right, you tend to take one solution and align it to maybe one challenge or process or problem. And I think as organizations move forward and they continue this digital transformation, that part of what that looks like is maturing their understanding in the way that they're leveraging this technology, so that the technologies that they do invest in are solving, dozens of problems and improving dozens of processes, not just, 1 or 2. So,
hey, Emily, I want to check to make sure. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Do not. If anybody has any last minute questions as we wrap up, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A. At this time, we've got 3 minutes, so I'd love just quick last minute thoughts, a kind of roundtable here. Let's start with Josh. Any last minute thoughts?
I think I interjected some of them there, but no, I think the biggest ones are just moving forward around the idea of a work platform. There's no reason employees need to go out to 10 different tools, throughout the day. And the other thing that I'll interject is, as Jamie mentioned, no organization or solution is perfect, but Microsoft certainly wants to listen. We certainly try to empathize with our customers and people that we support, and so if there is opportunity for feedback, more than willing to receive that.
Great, thank you. Jamie?
I think the big thing taking away from 2020, looking into the future, is a lot of the things that we are experiencing are here to stay. That this is almost a normal reaction, right? People want to work from home. I think there was a lot of mistrust and other reasons why it wasn't happening. Now it's been forced to happen. I think the world got very comfortable with a lot of these things very quickly. So I think that a lot of the things we spoke about today are not temporary. They're going to be here to stay. And I think you're going to continue to see acceptance of them and a lot of innovation around the support of these security, social, collaboration issues that we spoke about today.
Yeah, great. All right, well, thanks you guys so much. We're just about at time. Sincerely, Jamie, Josh, thank you so much for participating and joining us here in our continued partnership with Divurgent. We appreciate it. Jose, Mike, I really appreciate you guys hopping on and having this discussion. Thank you to the extended Divurgent technology and leadership teams for the continued support that we felt in 2020. kind of a unique way to bring some cool innovation and, continue to strive to expand our knowledge. So on behalf of the leadership team and everyone at Divurgent, thanks to Microsoft and thanks to our internal teams for the support this year. If there's any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or anybody at the Divurgent team. Thanks you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.